The restaurant was quiet that afternoon. The kind of quiet that makes every sound feel sharper. The scrape of a chair, the clink of a spoon, the faint hum of traffic beyond the glass. Outside, winter light fell pale and thin, but inside, the air carried warmth and the scent of coffee and baked bread. At a corner table by the window, Daniel and his 7-year-old son, Ethan, sat finishing their lunch. Daniel had taken the afternoon off to spend time with his boy after weeks of long work hours. It was supposed to be a simple, happy moment. Father and son, spaghetti and laughter, nothing more, nothing less. But sometimes, miracles begin in the most ordinary moments. As Daniel reached for his coffee, Ethan suddenly paused mid-bite. His small blue eyes followed the waitress, a young woman in her late 20s, who was wiping the table beside them. She moved quietly, almost too quietly, her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze fixed downward. There was no smile on her face, though her features were gentle and kind. When she thought no one was watching, she blinked rapidly, as if fighting tears. Ethan leaned closer to his father and whispered in that innocent, curious tone that children have when they see what adults pretend not to notice. "Daddy," he said softly, "why is she so sad?" And just like that, something inside Daniel stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. If you believe in kindness, in the power of small hearts to make big miracles, please take a moment to like this video, share it, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep spreading light in a world that often forgets how to care. Daniel glanced at the waitress again. He hadn't really paid attention to her before. She was young but looked older than her years. The faint tiredness around her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands as she cleaned, the way she forced a polite thank you when serving customers who barely noticed her. Her name tag read, Lily. He watched her for a few seconds more before answering his son. "I don't know, buddy," he murmured. "Maybe she's just had a hard day." But Ethan, with the sharp intuition only children possess, shook his head. "No, Daddy. She's really sad. Like she wants to cry." Daniel's chest tightened. There was something about the sincerity in his son's voice that refused to be ignored. After paying the bill, Daniel slipped a generous tip under the plate, but Ethan wasn't satisfied. "Can we do something nice for her?" he asked. Daniel smiled softly, his first instinct being practicality. They didn't know her, and it wasn't their business. But then he looked at his son's face, those big eyes filled with genuine concern, and something in him broke open. They left the restaurant, but Daniel couldn't shake the image of the waitress from his mind, the silent grief behind her professional smile. That night, while tucking Ethan into bed, the boy said again, "Daddy, I hope the sad lady is okay." Daniel hesitated at the door before turning off the light. "Me too, buddy, me too." The next afternoon, Daniel found himself driving back to the same café. He told himself it was for the coffee, but he knew better. The place was quieter than before. Lily was there again, tying her apron as she walked past. She looked surprised when she recognized him, offering a polite smile. "Back again?" she asked. "Yeah," Daniel said with an easy grin. "Your coffee's good. And my son wanted me to ask if you're doing okay." She froze for half a second, then quickly looked down. "That's kind of him," she murmured. "I'm fine, just long week." But her voice cracked slightly at the end, betraying the truth. He didn't press further, just nodded and took his seat. Yet as he sipped his drink, he couldn't ignore the flicker of pain behind her practiced calm. Something about her sadness felt deeply familiar, like looking into a mirror from years ago. A few days passed. Each morning, Daniel drove Ethan to school, then stopped by the cafe on his way to work. Sometimes Lily was there, sometimes not. When she was, he always left a kind word, a smile, or a small note on a napkin that said things like, "You're doing great. Keep going." He never asked personal questions, but slowly she began to smile, genuinely, not out of obligation. It was one of those mornings, about 2 weeks later, when she finally sat across from him for a brief moment during her break. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said softly. "I know you mean well, but I'm okay." Daniel smiled. "Maybe you are. But I've learned that sometimes people who say they're okay are the ones who need kindness the most." Her eyes glistened. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I lost my husband last year. He was in the army. And it's just been me and my little girl since then." The words hung heavy in the air. Daniel's throat tightened. He had lost his wife 5 years earlier to cancer. He knew that kind of silence, the hollow kind that lingers in the rooms of your home long after everyone else is gone. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. She nodded, blinking away tears. "It's been hard. I work here during the day and clean offices at night. My daughter's 6. She doesn't understand why mommy's always tired. Some days I don't either." Daniel wanted to say something, anything, but words felt small compared to the weight of her pain. He just said, "You're stronger than you think, Lily, and you're not alone, even if it feels that way." She smiled faintly, almost shyly, and went back to work. From then on, Daniel made it a ritual to bring Ethan with him every Saturday morning. Ethan would wave at Lily, and she'd bring him a cookie on the house. Slowly, laughter began to return to her face. Sometimes she'd talk about her daughter Mia, how she loved to draw and dreamed of being an artist. Other times, she'd listen to Daniel talk about his late wife Emma, and how Ethan still asked questions about her. Their small conversations became the quiet rhythm of their weekends, unspoken healing stitched through shared humanity. But then, one Saturday, Lily wasn't there. A different waitress said she'd taken a few days off because her daughter was sick. Ethan immediately looked worried. "Daddy, we should help her." Daniel hesitated. "We don't even know where she lives, buddy." Ethan thought for a moment, then said, "You said being kind is never wasted, right? That was enough." He asked around, and with the manager's permission, got her address to deliver a small care package. They showed up that afternoon with soup, some groceries, and a get-well card Ethan had drawn himself. When Lily opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. Her daughter Mia peeked from behind her, clutching a stuffed bunny. "Mr. Miller?" Lily said, stunned. "You didn't have to." "We wanted to," Daniel said gently. Ethan insisted. That day marked the beginning of something neither of them expected. Weeks turned into months. Lily's daughter and Ethan became close friends, two small hearts that healed each other without even trying. They'd draw together, chase bubbles in the park, and share giggles that filled the empty spaces in their parents' lives. Daniel and Lily found themselves talking more about grief, about parenting, about faith and exhaustion, and the quiet ache of starting over. One spring evening, as the sun melted into gold over the city, they sat together at a park bench, watching their children play. Lily turned to him and said softly, "You know, when Ethan asked you why I was sad, I think that moment saved me. I was barely holding on. But your kindness, his kindness, reminded me that life still had light." Daniel looked at her, his voice quiet. "And you reminded me that hearts can heal, even after they break." There was a silence between them, not empty, but full of understanding. The wind carried the laughter of their children, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt peace. Months later, on a chilly December evening, Daniel found himself back at that same restaurant, the very place it all began. This time, it wasn't Lily wiping tables. She was sitting beside him, wearing a warm smile, while their two children decorated cookies across the table. The restaurant lights shimmered softly against the window, reflecting the snow falling outside. Daniel reached for her hand. She looked at him, eyes glowing with tears and joy all at once. "Funny, isn't it?" he said quietly. "All this started because of one little question." Lily nodded, a question that changed everything. Ethan, overhearing them, looked up and grinned. "Daddy, I told you she was sad that day." Daniel laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "You sure did, buddy." Ethan smiled proudly. "But she's not sad anymore." Lily's voice trembled as she whispered, "No, I'm not. Time has a way of turning pain into purpose when hearts remain open. What began as a stranger's sadness became the spark that brought two broken families together. Through kindness, small, quiet, persistent kindness, they all found a second chance at happiness." In the years that followed, Lily and Daniel eventually married. Ethan and Mia grew up side by side, their childhood filled with love and laughter that neither parent had thought they'd ever feel again. And every Christmas, Daniel would tell the story of how one innocent question, "Why is she so sad, Daddy?" had started a miracle that healed them all. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps us create more stories that remind the world that compassion still exists. Before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe one small act of kindness can change a life forever? We'd love to hear your thoughts.